There are 5 main paths to fretboard fluency. I've spent the last decade testing all of them, and one of them is 4 times faster than the others. I've now taught this path to over 4,000 people, and 5 of them have won Grammys. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly how it works. By the end of this video, I want you to understand 3 things. Number 1, what fretboard fluency is, and why I think it should be your #1 goal as an intermediate guitar player. Number 2, the 5 paths that guitarists take to get to fretboard fluency, and the common traps that 90% of guitar players fall into on their way there. And number 3, something I call the 3 Ps, which is a framework for rapid skill development that I've used to break thousands of people out of plateaus. And if you watch nothing else in this video, make sure that you catch the 3 Ps section, because it's really key to cutting off years in your skill development. And no, this isn't another tutorial on the pentatonic scale or the cage system or something like that. Those tools are useful, but they really represent the first 10% of this process. In this video, we're gonna be covering the other 90%. Now, if you're wondering who I am and why the heck you should listen to me, let me give you a quick 30-second intro. So hi, my name is Spencer. I'm the founder here at Sonora. I'm a former software engineer and an ethnomusicologist. I've spent the past decade playing, studying, and teaching all over the world, unpacking styles like flamenco and bluegrass and even Indian Carnatic music. Over the past few years, my team and I have helped thousands of students achieve fretboard fluency, including Grammy winners and legendary guitar players like Billy Strings and Tom Misch, Jesse Carmichael from Maroon 5, Jason White from Green Day, and Snake Sabo from Skid Row. Now, as you can imagine, over the years of seeing thousands of students through this process, I've developed a lot of strong opinions about what works and what doesn't work, and I'm gonna break down what I've learned in this video. Okay, so let's jump in here. First, how do you know if you're at the intermediate plateau? Well, you're past the basics, so you know your open chords and bar chords, pentatonic shapes, and maybe even a little bit of theory. But the fretboard still kind of looks like a Rubik's Cube to you. Your solos sound kind of robotic, like you're just running up and down box patterns and not really making music necessarily. Jamming can be stressful at this level. You get lost, you repeat the same kind of stale licks and lack some confidence. And you don't really know what to practice, so progress feels slow or non-existent. That's why it's called the plateau. If this sounds familiar, you're totally not alone. 90% of guitar players are stuck here. And that's because most practice methods are just fundamentally broken. Now, imagine this instead. You pick up the guitar, and instead of thinking about what you should play, your fingers just kind of know what to do. You hear a melody and your hands can translate it instantly. You sit down to jam, and instead of feeling lost, you're effortlessly playing and responding and creating in the jamming process. That's ultimately what fluency feels like, and it's what separates guitarists from true musicians. And the good news is, fluency isn't some mystical talent, it's actually a learnable skill. And once you unlock it, everything changes about your musical experience. So what is fretboard fluency exactly? Well, at its core, it's about understanding a handful of essential musical concepts and knowing how those map onto the fretboard. But beyond that, it's about transitioning from a scale and pattern-based way of thinking into a more chord tone and intervallic way of playing. Let's take soloing as an example here. Most guitar players default to a box-based sort of pentatonic approach when they take a solo. So this approach is familiar, it works, but it's kind of skating on top of the changes rather than weaving through and outlining the underlying harmony. Now here is a solo that's rooted on chord tones and some music fundamentals instead. Difference. One of them is kind of generic and flat, and the other one is descriptive. It sort of weaves in and out of the chords and describes each one as it passes by. This is one of the biggest things that separates an amateur player from a professional player. Pros play contextually, making their solos an extension of the song itself. They're not just running scales, they're outlining chords. So how do you actually unlock this style of playing? Well, there are really 6 steps. First, you need to just internalize all of the scale shapes and patterns across the neck. Most players never really get past this phase because it's tedious, but with the right approach, you can actually kind of shortcut it and get there a lot faster than you might expect. Now the second step in the process is arpeggio-based soloing. For this, you play through the chord progression using only the chord's arpeggios. Here's what that sounds like. Now this might sound a little bit robotic, but it gets you used to seeing chord tones as they pass by, and it's really an important stage. So next we want to adjust our starting points and our direction. So instead of always starting from the root of the arpeggio and ascending it, we want to start from the top and come down and start connecting and mixing and matching all of the different arpeggios while still only targeting those chord tones. Here's what that sounds like. Starting to sound like something, right? So once you can do that, we want to start weaving in non-chord tones in between the chord tones. And you can just borrow notes from the parent major scale for this. Here's what that sounds like. So that's starting to sound pretty good, but it kind of sounds like a run-on sentence. So the next piece, we want to focus on phrasing and space. We want to insert pauses, we want to repeat key melodic phrases, and we want to keep chord tones at the center of our focus. All right, now we're getting somewhere here. So now for this final stage, we can start to blend the old bag of tricks with this new, more chord conscious way of thinking. Here's what that might sound like. Once you shift into chord tone thinking, literally everything changes. Your solos start to tell a story rather than just running up and down patterns. Now, solos get a lot of attention, but 95% of the time, guitar players are playing rhythm and harmony. But most people are still playing the same bar chords and open chords that they learned in their first month of guitar playing. And there's a whole world of harmony and expression beyond those basic chords. For instance, you might have learned that you can play a C major 7 chord like this, or a C major chord like this. But did you know that you can also play it like this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this? Sticking with that limited vocabulary down to the bottom of the neck doesn't just make your playing sound more kind of generic and stale, it also prevents people from wanting to play with you. And you might be asking, what does knowing a whole bunch of chords have to do with playing well with others? Let me tell you a story about it. So back in college, I landed this gig with this band that I really admired. I was so stoked. I showed up to our first rehearsal super prepared and had all my gear dialed in, had learned the set list, everything. And I thought it went really well. But later that night, I got a text message from the band leader basically saying, hey man, it's not gonna work out. We're gonna need to go with another guitar player. And honestly, I was crushed. I didn't know what I did wrong. So I asked him directly, hey, what do I need to work on? And reluctantly, he said, honestly, the bass and the keys player felt like you were stepping on their lane the whole time. And I had never heard of that before. I didn't even know what that meant. So the next day I asked my guitar mentor and he just laughed in my face. He was like, were you playing bar chords the whole night? And I said, yeah, like I was just reading the chord charts. I didn't make any mistakes. I played all the right chords. And he was like, yeah, that's why you lost the gig. Those chords are too thick. You were muddying the mix. And that's when I learned that every instrument in a band has a specific lane, a frequency that they play within. The bass holds down the low end, the keys kind of hang out in the mids, and the guitar is really supposed to complement and fill in the cracks without clashing with the other instruments. And because I was just bashing away at bar chords the whole night, I was really stepping on everyone's toes. I was clouding the mix, and I was really pissing off my new bandmates in the process. And this is why if you're a serious guitar player and you're stuck at this intermediate plateau, I think your #1 goal should get to fluency. And the reason I say that is because if I think about my musical journey, all of the most frustrating and defeating experiences happened before fluency, and all of the most fulfilling and connective and awe-inspiring moments happened after fluency. It's just better. So now the next question that people ask is, okay, cool, I want to get to fluency. How long does it take though? And the common assumption here is it's going to take me 10,000 hours. But at this point, having guided so many people through this process, I can tell you that you can tackle it in a few months. And that sounds like a big claim, so let me break down why that is. So there are 3 phases in a student's musical journey. The first one's called absorption, and it's basically understanding the fundamental concepts and building the muscle memory for how it all maps onto the fretboard. It's tedious, it takes time, but it's doable. Then we've got this integration phase, which is turning those shapes and exercises into real music. And most intermediate players skip this step because it's not immediately clear how to apply a lot of these concepts. It's not your fault, it's just there's not a lot of great guidance out there around this. I will cover how to fix this later in the video. Now the final phase here is what we call intuition, and that's refining everything to be intuitive, automatic, and musical. This is where we find our unique voice and our own artistic expression. And honestly, that's a lifelong process. Every great guitar player continues to work on this every single day. And of course, these phases overlap and different techniques develop at different speeds. But when people say, mastery takes 10,000 hours, they're typically including that final, slow, detail-oriented intuition phase. But fluency actually happens around phase 2, and I've seen focused students reach that in just 3 to 6 months of consistent, deliberate practice. And the great part is, fluency is not this distant goal. It's very measurable and very achievable. You could do it this year, and when you do, it will open doors for you that you didn't even realize were on the menu, just like it has for a lot of our other students. Like our student Steven here, for example, who broke out of his 30-year plateau in his 60s and went from rediscovering the guitar to crowd surfing at his own sold-out shows in London in less than a year.
Spencer, I didn't think this would happen in my life. It's just amazing, just absolutely amazing.
Or like Tiffany, who was stuck for 10 years, we got her to fluency and she landed her dream job at Abbey Road.
Being able to play guitar and musicality is a really big part of it. They're training you to be an engineer and producer. I've got to a point where I can say that.
Or Kavita, who came in knowing some basic chords and feeling kind of discouraged having lost an audition to play with her church band. A few months later, she followed our process and she re-auditioned and landed the gig.
I'm in the band, yes.
Our student Stan Cunningham went from being a lower intermediate guitar player to writing songs for Chris Brown and ultimately winning a Grammy this year. So to get a little bit sentimental with you for a second, this is ultimately what it's all about for me personally. I don't care about being famous. I don't care about playing the fastest or flashiest solo to boost my own ego. I care about cultivating a craft that allows me to connect more deeply with my friends and family, that allows me to connect more deeply with a community, and ultimately connect more deeply with myself. And that's ultimately why I think mastery paths like this one are so important. So a quick side note here before I get into the specifics of how to actually get to fretboard fluency. If you're curious to see how close you are to fretboard fluency, where your specific gaps might be in your playing, and then have us recommend a tailored path for you based on your specific goals on the instrument, you can book a totally free call with an expert on my team who will run you through a comprehensive skills assessment and give you a really clear game plan on what you need to focus on in your practice sessions. And then if you wanted to learn more about how we could actually support you in doing that directly, they'd be happy to tell you more about that as well. So just click that button below to book a free call with us. So there are 5 main paths that guitarists take to tackle fluency. I've personally walked down all of them, and I've spent the last 10 years dissecting what works and what doesn't about each approach. Some of the most common methods, ones that you might have tried, are actually designed in a way that keeps you stuck. So let's break it down here. First, the most important thing is just to buy extremely expensive gear. Shout out Guitar Center. No, but really, the first path is what I call the path of indecision. And that's where, honestly, 90% of players unknowingly end up. dabbling, watching random YouTube videos, and riding waves of motivation with long stretches where the guitar just collects dust. This kind of goes without saying, but the problem with this approach is there's no structure, there's no clear path. There's no awareness of skill gaps or how to fill them, and there's no accountability. So progress is slow or honestly non-existent. I have talked to tens of thousands of guitar players, and I have never seen this approach work. So if we're actually serious about reaching our potential on guitar, we need a better strategy, right? The next path that people tend to jump into is private one-on-one lessons. And this is better because you get a bit more structure and a cadence to it. It's more personalized to you, and there's a bit of accountability because you don't want to show up to a lesson having not practiced. And that's all good. But there are two glaring issues with traditional one-on-one lessons that prevent real progress. The first problem is finding a truly great teacher is next to impossible. When I lived in the Bay Area, I cycled through 7 different teachers, some of them highly recommended, only to realize that most had no real structure. And here's the thing, your time is your most valuable asset. If you're taking advice on how to spend hours of your week, hundreds of hours per year, you need confidence that their guidance will actually get you where you want to go. And most guitar teachers have no formal training in teaching, and often just kind of rely on improvisation rather than any structured methods. So this lack of structure is exactly why many private lessons begin with the dreaded question, so what do you want to learn today? This is honestly the hallmark of a bad teacher. A skilled teacher should have a concept for your overall goals, and then equipped with that information, they should take the wheel and steer. And it makes sense, right? You don't know what you need to work on, which is why you booked the lesson in the first place. So why should you be the one directing it? When students come to us after years of lessons, we often find major gaps in their foundation, which means that they've invested in some case years of time, money, and energy, yet they still feel stuck. The wrong teacher doesn't just slow down your progress, they actively waste your time. But let's say that you get exceptionally lucky and find a rare unicorn teacher in your hometown, someone with chops and a strong teaching philosophy and all the right structure. Well, then you'll run into the second issue with private study, which is what I call the procrastination loop. Here's what usually happens. You take a lesson on Monday, feel motivated for a day, and then life takes over. The next Sunday, you realize that you haven't touched the guitar all week, and you cram for your next lesson. You show up on Monday embarrassed, with little to no progress to show for it. And then the cycle repeats itself. Does that sound familiar? Well, that's because nearly every private student falls into this pattern. And it's not your fault. It's a feedback loop problem. You need more accountability to create consistency. The good news is there's a very easy, systematic solve for this problem, and we're going to dive into exactly what that is later in this video. So if one-on-one lessons aren't the answer, maybe a course website is. That sounds smart. Until you realize it lacks the key benefits of private lessons, which is the personalized feedback, accountability, and guidance. That's why people have a graveyard of unfinished courses. A recent study showed that the average completion rate on an online course is 3%. And that's not because people lack motivation necessarily, it's because real accountability is essential for learning. And it's also not the course website's fault. It's just impossible for them to offer the level and quality of personalized attention that's really necessary for students to succeed when customers are only used to paying like $10 a month. The other main issue that I see is just that course websites have to compete on quantity over quality. So they proudly advertise that they have hundreds of courses and thousands of hours of content. They flood you with content to keep you subscribed longer, not to get you fluent faster. That's basically the opposite of what an intermediate guitar player needs. You already have YouTube if you want to drink from the fire hose. What you need is better curation and a clear, optimized path. That's why we only have one curriculum here. We've rebuilt it 5 times from scratch, refining it based on real student results. Each iteration, it's actually gotten smaller and faster and more effective. So yeah, that's kind of my hot take on course websites. The fourth approach is rare for adults over 30, but it actually solves most of the issues that we've covered. And that is just going all in and attending a top university like Berkeley or Juilliard. So provided you can get in, it's great because it provides structure, accountability, a community to play with, and a highly personalized experience, honestly. The only problem is it costs $80,000 a year for 4 years and requires uprooting your entire life. And for most working adults, that's just not realistic or even necessary. Another downside, most universities are designed to keep you there paying tuition for 4 years, racking up over $320,000 in loans in the process. And they do this by requiring you to complete a certain number of classes, regardless of if those classes are actually driving you towards your goal. And if your goal is fluency, you can actually get there in a fraction of that time just by simply cutting out the fluff. So for 99% of people watching this, university just isn't really the answer. So if YouTube tutorials don't work, private lessons have a lot of major pitfalls, and course websites are just a graveyard of unfinished lessons, then what actually works? Well, after working with over 4,000 students on this process, I found that the fastest way to fluency comes down to just 3 things. I call them the 3 Ps. The first P is the path. The path needs to be clear and simple. Zero fluff, no confusion. The path needs to be customized to you. It needs to target your unique gaps and weaknesses. It needs to be well sequenced, meaning that it builds progressively like a knowledge tree, no fragmented learning. And finally, it needs to be utility dense, so no filler content, avoiding lick-based learning and that kind of thing. The next P is the process, which is really the how of how you practice. And that process starts with identifying your gaps, so knowing what your specific weaknesses are. Then we use consistent, bite-sized practice sessions every single day to compound wins. Next, we want to use tools like spaced repetition and chunking to reinforce key concepts efficiently. And finally, we want to move quickly from concept to application. So not just practicing exercises for exercise sake, but actually making music. Now, the third P here is really here for alliteration, and that's the people, but it really boils down to accountability and feedback. And the key principle here is that frequent feedback equals faster progress. If you can get feedback on a daily basis, it'll speed up your rate of progress by 5 to 7x. The next thing is finding opportunities to play with other people as frequently as possible. Real-world application really matters with this stuff. And finally, we have community, which is being surrounded by people who are on a similar path for motivation and inspiration. But there's one tweak to this last piece that massively accelerates progress. You'll still improve without it, but with it, we've seen game-changing results for our students, and I'll show you how that works in just a little bit here. So with this framework in place, it's a lot easier to see why these other approaches don't really work, right? So what we really want is something that kind of checks all these boxes, that's going to guarantee that we're actually successful at our goal, and is going to ensure that we're using our time in the most efficient way possible. And that's really where Sonora comes in. You can think of it as an accelerated conservatory, but without the massive price tag, the wasted time, and the outdated methods. And instead of 4 years and over $300,000 at music school, our students reach fluency in just 3 to 12 months for a fraction of the price. And the interesting part is that our most successful students only really have to practice about an hour a day. They just use a different approach to practice that unlocks results a lot faster. So let me break down how it works. There are really 3 main components. At Sonora, we start with the path, which is a comprehensive fluency curriculum. It's equivalent to what you would learn in an undergraduate program at a top music school. The key difference is it's optimized for speed of learning. So we cut out all the fluff and we focus only on what will directly improve your playing. Some people hear collegiate level and assume it's super heavy on theory and overly academic. It is not. Our approach keeps theory simple and digestible and focused on real-world application. You can absolutely handle it. Everything is delivered through our industry-leading learning software that we developed in-house. It adapts to you by tracking what you've learned, what you really should learn next, and what you're about to forget based on your own forgetting curve. It generates custom practice plans so that you know exactly what to work on every time you sit down with the instrument. And it's rooted in the neuroscience of learning, so it accelerates your learning process while still making it fun. And finally, it has spaced repetition baked into the software, which is a powerful method for language learning to prevent forgetting and reinforcing key skills. So next, we pair you up one-on-one with one of our world-class mentors. And while some of the best players in the world aren't always the best teachers, we have spent years curating an all-star team of great guitar instructors. Our instructors have won Grammys, they've played with household names, and they've toured sold-out stadiums. But most importantly, they have mastered both the craft of playing and the craft of teaching. Here's a quick taste of some of their playing. Pretty incredible stuff, right? So you'll be paired up with one of them, and they'll work with your specific goals to create a customized pathway and hold you accountable to make progress efficiently. Now, remember when I was talking about the importance of a fast feedback loop earlier? We found that progress is directly tied to how frequently students get feedback, and we pioneered daily video exchanges to supercharge your learning process. Here's how it works. The mentor starts by diagnosing gaps and assigning targeted, bite-sized exercises. You then practice and then submit a video of your progress every single day. Your mentor responds with same-day feedback, and if you're ready, they give you the next step to unblock your progress. We have found over the years that this daily cadence not only provides amazing accountability for students, but it also allows them to progress 4 times faster than traditional methods. And it's a major reason why our students reach fluency in a matter of months instead of years. This is also one of the superpowers of online education. Trying to do a daily feedback loop like this in a traditional one-on-one lesson would be prohibitively expensive and time-consuming to pull off. Our video exchange system allows mentors to provide deeper, more detailed feedback and address subtle nuances that might be missing in live sessions. And on top of that daily back and forth, you'll also have your typical one-on-one lessons over Zoom and access to your mentor's office hours twice a week, so you get plenty of face time for any questions that you might have. Now, you might be wondering about the time commitment. Know this, our top students practice about an hour a day, or roughly 7 hours per week. It's really not about cramming. Quality matters a lot more than quantity. With consistent, focused practice, you'll be super well positioned to succeed in the program. Now, the final piece here is community, and it's a really special part of Sonora. We host several live classes every single week with top-tier guitar players, songwriters, and producers. We do group recording projects where we apply what we're learning in a real-world setting. And a few times a year, we take students on in-person expeditions to iconic music cities to learn directly from local legends. This last year, we hosted expedition trips to New Orleans and Nashville for a week of immersive learning with guitarists like Guthrie Trapp and Grammy Award-winning guitar player Chris Eldridge from the Punch Brothers, among a whole host of others, and our entire staff here at Sonora. And between all the lessons, we jammed nonstop, applying everything that we learned in real time.
Luckily, the program's been incredible. The people that you've brought in are magic, really. The way that they know the guitar and the neck, it's like an extension of them. It's like they're talking through it. Being able to see that, not just like up close, you could do that through a video, but to be able to like ask some questions and get to know them and how they went about it. It's a very unique experience, and I'm very thankful for it.
So those are super fun, and the community is just awesome. Here are some of the things that people in our community have said about their Sonora experience.
I gotta say, just because I found it off an ad and stuff like that, and something in the back of my mind thought it wasn't gonna be as good as it is. And it's better than I thought it was gonna be.
Before Sonora, I really didn't know what I didn't know. It's amazing how much I didn't know about the fretboard, even though I've been playing for that long. Sonora has opened my eyes to the fretboard.
I chose Sonora because I really felt stuck. I had been self-taught for about 18 years. I was just really tired of accepting negative mindsets that I was as good as I was going to be, and I was just an intermediate guitar player. I didn't want to go through the process of trying to find a guitar teacher in my area and then hope that their methods worked. So having that constant ability to send videos back and forth with Michael was incredible. And those videos back and forth were just as impactful as the live lessons I had with him. My guitar playing understanding has increased tenfold. I'd probably say the last 6 months has taken probably at least 5 years off of my journey to playing at an expert level. So it's definitely been like a rocket ship for my progress.
My name is David Bennett, and I'm a musician and music producer here in Kansas City, Missouri. Last year, I signed up for the Sonora Guitar Mastery Intensive program, and I have to say I'm very grateful that I did. Nothing in my music education career has helped me quite as much as Sonora. Working with the Sonora program, and particularly working with Matt, literally changed my life, like absolutely changed the game for my ability as a songwriter, as a lead soloer, somebody who didn't feel confident before in terms of mastering the fretboard, and I feel great about it now. And I've signed up for even more because I already know after only doing it for so many months just how valuable it is. And I just can't wait to see how much I'm going to grow over the next year. So if you're looking to level up, if you're looking to grow in terms of guitar playing, understanding music theory, mastering the fretboard, gaining confidence, I highly recommend checking out the Sonora program. It's absolutely invaluable, absolutely changed the game for me.
So who is this really for? Sonora is really for intermediate guitar players who are stuck at this plateau and looking for real fluency. It's also for former players who had to pause for other life commitments and want to pick it back up. It's for music school candidates considering an alternative, accelerated path to traditional music school. It's for guitar teachers who want to refine their teaching methods. It's for church or worship musicians looking to improve their playing. It's for music producers who want to deepen their guitar skills and kind of add guitar to their toolkit. It's also for just passionate professionals. Maybe they're doctors or software engineers or military personnel with a strong passion for guitar, and maybe they don't have aspirations of being a professional guitar player anytime soon, but they really want to actualize their full potential on the instrument. And finally, it's for people with at least 7 hours per week to dedicate to structured practice. So just a few common questions that we hear. The first one being, what if I'm not advanced enough? And the answer is, if you have baseline dexterity, meaning you can play the open chords, the bar chords, and maybe a pentatonic scale, then you are ready and equipped to do this program. If you still have curiosities about whether or not you'd be good enough to start, just book a skills assessment with my team below, and they can help point you in the right direction. The other question we hear often is, I've tried other courses and failed. Why is this any different? Well, that's exactly why we built Sonora, frankly. That combination of accountability, daily feedback, and a personalized plan for you is really the thing that most people need to kind of mitigate that procrastination and ultimately finish the process. So if you're interested in learning more about this, or you want to find out exactly what's holding back your playing, my team is offering free one-on-one guitar fluency assessments. In it, we'll do a complete skills diagnostic where we pinpoint the exact roadblocks and gaps in your playing that are holding you back from progressing. And then we'll recommend a personalized roadmap to get you to fluency and give you immediate next steps. And if you want to know what it could look like to work a little bit more deeply with my team, we'd be happy to tell you more about that as well. So like I said, they're totally free, but we only do a limited number of them each week. So once they fill up, we close enrollments for it. So if you're really serious about breaking through this plateau, book that call with my team now before the spots fill up. I look forward to seeing you on the inside.
Man, it's really been so inspiring and life-changing. It's really given me such a better structure for learning how to play guitar and just developing the right attitude about it, understanding the necessary discipline to get better. It has really transformed my ability to play and enjoy playing. Before I was with Sonora, I feel like there's a lot of guesswork for me in doing this. And now I have a much more structured approach to playing, to songwriting, to practicing. I can't thank you guys enough for just offering this, because it's really, really transformed my life. Before I was in Sonora, I hadn't played a single gig ever, and now I'm about to play my 7th one.
I have been fortunate to be a member of Sonora for several years now, and it truly has changed my approach to guitar, my understanding of a guitar, and most importantly, my ability to play guitar. A lot of it has to do with the robust offerings that Sonora has, including the curriculum, the master classes, the workshops. They all play an important role, but the most important role is your mentor. I've been very fortunate to have Matt Sickles. I can't say enough about him. He's a monster guitar player. I will tell you that he's an even better person and beyond that, a better teacher. I'm a huge fan of Sonora and an even bigger fan of Matt Sickles.
I joined Sonora about 6 months ago, and it's been a real game changer for me. Almost like a life-changing experience. I've been practicing guitar before that, you know, kind of grabbing a YouTube video here and there, but Sonora gave me direction and accountability. Those are the two main things that I got from there. So if you're considering getting some real structure in your playing and learning, that's Sonora.
So I had been playing guitar for a few years, and I decided that I wanted to take my playing to the next level. You know, I spent a lot of time crawling the internet, reading through books, and watching YouTube videos, and sure, I learned some stuff, but I felt like I was kind of all over the place, and I needed a clear path forward. That's exactly what Sonora has provided me. You know, the program is structured, it's very straightforward, and it's an incredibly effective software. But honestly, what really sets it apart is the mentorship. Having someone there to push you, answer questions, and guide you throughout your journey, it's priceless. You know, and these mentors, they're not just local music shop instructors, these are seasoned pros. And you can tell they truly love what they do, and it shows in the way that they teach and how invested they are with your progress. You know, Sonora has been an absolute game changer for me, and I couldn't recommend it anymore.
I just feel like the approach that we're taking is very practical because it's bite-sized pieces. And every time there's either an uncertainty or a doubt, there's a way to interact and get steered back. The old Jeremy would have watched like a Jens Larson and tried to learn a bunch of licks and had no idea what I was doing and never be able to use them in a real situation because the time is moving too fast. So it's, I gotta tell you, man, I'm very, very thankful. This Sonora thing is the best, like the absolute best.
You ever pick up the guitar, play a couple of licks, and then feel like you haven't made any progress in years? Well, that's because you're stuck in a loop. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how to get out of that loop.